Welcome to Voice It, a podcast showcasing people in the Clare Valley and the mid-north of South Australia who've started their own businesses from scratch and have turned them into success stories. This is a chance for them to tell you their story. I'm your host, Annabelle Homer.
One thing that used to really annoy me was when people say, oh, you're a bush lawyer, oh, poor country, oh, the country. And so I've tried to create something in the country that gives country people and business people in the country a service that is sort of equivalent, so they don't need to go to Adelaide to get the good service.
Meet Kelly Morgan, the woman behind Kelly Legal, a law firm she started in Jamestown back in 2014. Kelly grew up on a farm in Yongala, the coldest place on earth. Well, in South Australia it is anyway. She describes herself as an accidental lawyer. She initially wanted to be a school teacher or an architect, but it was her father that ignited the idea of law, and she hasn't looked back since. Kelly had this big idea to head to Sydney and work the glamorous life for a big law firm. But her life took an unexpected turn when her father passed away suddenly, which led her to come home and help her mum. It was then she started working in a local law firm for 10 years and then starting her own practice. She talks about what's involved in running a law firm in the country, the rapid growth it underwent as soon as she opened the doors, her frustrations when people perceive country law firms as inferior to city ones, and her passion to train and nurture law graduates to encourage them to undertake a country posting. But her life has also been quite a roller coaster ride. We delve into how she navigated life after her father's suicide, becoming pregnant with twins 4 months after starting her own practice, and then losing one, and then getting pregnant with twins 5 years later, with Max being diagnosed at birth with cystic fibrosis. I love Kelly's motto, which comes from her father. Worrying is like a rocking chair. It gives you something to do, but gets you nowhere. And I guess this has got her through the tough times, but also has helped her build such a successful business. This is Kelly's story. Well, firstly, I just wanted to say thank you so much for having me here in your beautiful offices here in Jamestown.
It's a pleasure. Thanks for coming.
How are you feeling?
Good. Yes, very excited. We always love to have new people around. So, yeah, looking forward to having a chat.
Kelly, the name. Is that your name?
Yes, it is. It's often a good conversation starter. So I was born Kelly Marie Morgan, and I met a lovely young gentleman whose name was Bernie Kelly at the front bar of the Jamestown Hotel. And there are a few jokes flying around when we first started dating, that one day, if we ever got married, that would be my name. And I thought, how silly. But anyway, so love took over, and Kelly it is.
Did you have moments of, I think I'll just keep my maiden name?
Well, for work I do. Professionally, I'm Kelly Morgan, purely because it's a pretty big mouthful in court to say I'm Kelly from Kelly Legal, Judge Kelly. So, so professionally I think it's a little, being a lawyer, it's a little bit more appropriate to be somewhat serious from time to time.
Is it just me, or do a lot of people ask you that question?
Yes, it's usually the number one conversation starter. Most people, when I first started, because it was just myself and my secretary, most people said, oh, gee, so this is Kelly and Kelly. Who's the other partner? And no, it's just me. So, yeah, it's been a bit of fun along the way.
I love it. I absolutely love it. Let's start from the very beginning. Where did life begin for you? Before you became this big-time lawyer, where did life start for you?
So I had a wonderful childhood. I grew up on a little farm in a place called Yongala. So for those that don't know, it's the coldest place in the state, and that's our claim to fame. So
How cold does it get?
Freezing. We're in the minuses in winter. I always laugh because we grew up with an outside toilet, so I can tell you exactly how cold it got. Yeah, no, absolutely freezing in Yongala. But yeah, so I grew up there with my mum and my dad, who was a farmer, and my two sisters, and I stayed there until I did all my junior schooling there and a little bit of my high schooling.
A little bit of your high schooling. So did you go away after that, did you?
Yeah, so I went off to boarding school. So I went to Loretto College for a few years towards the end of my high school years. So, yeah, it was great.
How would you describe yourself as a young child?
Most people wouldn't believe it now, but I was an incredibly shy and very withdrawn little child. Yeah, I would often be too scared to get out the car to go into the, news agency to get the newspaper and things like that. So I was extremely shy, very much enjoyed growing up on the farm. So spent a lot of time with my dad, rounding up the sheep in the shearing shed and doing all those sorts of things, but also really enjoyed being home with mum, cooking and doing fun things like that. So probably a mix of both, I'd say.
So what was it like going away, leaving home?
Terrifying. So I was at Peterborough High School, and it was there was only one other girl in my year level and a few boys. And I still remember my first day at college. There were about 160 girls, all my age. So it was definitely a baptism of fire. Initially, I was really overwhelmed, but I met some wonderful friends in the boarding school, and we're still very good friends today. Every October long weekend, they come up to Jamestown and stay with their kids. So, yeah, we have a really great friendship. For me, it was the friendships and the people that I met there sort of got me through the initial anxiety, and, yeah, we got up to lots of fun.
Did you know what you wanted to do in high school?
Well, look, it's quite funny. So I call myself a little bit of the accidental lawyer. So I never, through school, had any desire to become a lawyer. When I finished year 12, we had to do preferences. So you'd put down sort of your first 5 preferences as to what you wanted to do when you finished school. And I remember I always wanted to be a school teacher, but that kind of drifted off in about year 10 or 11. And then I decided, I went through lots of phases, occupational therapy, anything that was kind of trendy at the time. And then I sort of decided I really had a strong interest in design. And so I thought, I'm going to do architecture. I put that down as a preference, but then I remember my dad saying, I think you're a bit smart to do something like that. Why don't you put down law or, see how you go? And back then it was quite difficult to get it into law. So, there was no bridging courses and things like that. So I put down law as my preference, and lo and behold, I got in.
Oh, so you were a smarty pants.
Well, maybe I got lucky.
Humble as well. Okay.
But yeah, so when I finished school, you couldn't study your law degree first year out. You had to do you got a reserved place, and then you had to do another non-law degree first. So most people did commerce and things like that, and I did architecture. So I sort of did that degree whilst doing law.
Did you like architecture?
Loved it. Yeah, the starting salary was really crappy, and it was really hard to get a good job in architecture. So I sort of the law prevailed.
Did you know much about law though, and what it entailed?
Yeah, so look, in terms of what it looked like as a career path, I didn't really know. I just assumed that I'd be working in one of the big law firms in Adelaide, and I always saw it as a little bit glamorous. I'm probably glad I didn't know too much as I trundled my way through.
So tell me about your first years out on the workforce in law.
So when I finished my law degree, I had planned to sort of work over in Sydney, and I'd put in lots of applications and things like that.
Why Sydney? Was there not much scope in Adelaide?
There was. I just wanted to have a change and, just do something different. And I thought, I was young. That was a good time to do it. It didn't probably really matter where it was. But I sort of had my heart set on working in a really big firm. But, so things sort of were outside of my control, though. When I finished my law degree, my dad died. And so, it was back to the farm to help mum for a little while, and in the course of sort of moving back to the farm, I got quite I did a little bit of work experience at the local law firm and thought, this actually isn't too bad. And then I met Bernie and I thought, he's quite nice. And then I got a job, and so things just snowballed from there. Yeah.
So what happened to your dad?
So Dad was a farmer, and we were right in the middle of a really bad drought. And so, so Dad died by suicide. So it was quite traumatic for Mum at the time.
And for you?
And my other sister was off at boarding school, and I have another sister who's very disabled. So Mum was home with her. So, my job was to sort of go back and help Mum and my sister and, work out what to do with our farm.
So how old were you at the time?
I was in my low 20s, so I think it happened just before I turned 21.
Wow.
Yeah.
How did you navigate that?
I've always had a bit of a motto, and it was something my dad has instilled in me, ironically, from when I was a young age. He always used to say that worrying is like a rocking chair. It gives you something to do but gets you nowhere. So I've really sort of hung on to that, and that's been my sort of motto through any situation, whether it's catastrophic or just something a bit difficult, or something that's a difficult case or something that I'm going through on the day. So just dust yourself off and get on with it.
How was your mum?
Mum is an amazing woman. She's very, very strong and resilient, and so she managed to keep things together, give her 3 girls, so give us a great sort of life still post that. And yeah, she stayed on the farm for a long time. She's repartnered now to a lovely man, and she's very happy. And we've sold the farm sort of
I was going to say, yes, but you kept the farm for how long after that?
Many years. So I'd say about 10 years. And we leased it to one of my uncles who was very good in making sure things were taken care of. So yeah, it's just that resilience and support in a small community, I suppose.
So when you came home, you helped your mum. When did you actually start doing that work experience at the law firm? Or did it take a while?
Almost straight away. So I was approached by Jason Bell, who was working at Vumard Lawyers at the time with John Vumard. So they sort of knew that I was back, and they were handling Dad's estate. So I think they just put 2 and 2 together, and I started working there. Really enjoyed it. There was a great group of people at the workforce. So I just sort of slipped in by default and stayed there for about 10 years.
10 years?
Yeah.
So you met your husband at the same time?
Yep.
After the 10 years of working at that law firm, where did you go next?
So my husband and I had been trying to have kids for several years after we were married, and it sort of wasn't working out. So we thought perhaps we'll just, dial back a little bit, and I'll just go out on my own for a bit of flexibility and a slower lifestyle. So I started my own law firm in Jamestown, and my PA, who I'd been with, came with me, and we sort of started up Kelly Legal together. So it was about 10 years ago in 2014 that we started up the firm, and we was a really interesting dynamic because I'd gone from sort of a workplace, things were really busy, to sort of opening up a firm going, oh, we don't have any clients and we don't really have, much organised here. But day number 1, we opened and the phone rang, and it hasn't really stopped ringing since. So
there must have been scope to have another law firm in Jamestown.
Yeah, absolutely. And Jamestown's quite a large regional centre, so we service a lot of other areas, a lot of farming areas and things like that. So, we've got 7 lawyers now, and we're all absolutely flat out. Yeah, plenty of legal work here in Jamestown.
So when you started and you went out on your own, was there any particular aspects of law that you were really interested in yourself?
At the time that I started the firm, I had been doing a lot of family law, so a lot of property settlements and things like that. But I'd had a pretty solid background in all areas. So I'd done wills and estates, commercial law, all sorts of things like that. So I probably knew that starting my own firm in that first year or 2, I pretty much would take whatever work came in. But my real interest is probably in sort of the succession planning, commercial law space, complex property settlements, and I love property law and sort of those sorts of transactions. But yeah, we're a general firm, so we still do everything.
And what's it like, starting a business in a small community when there's already another law firm? Was there anything tricky that you had to navigate? Or was it pretty straight down the line?
Well, actually, I probably, because I was young and quite naive at the time, I probably didn't think too hard about those things. And because I wasn't setting out to start a firm, a huge law firm, I was really I knew there'd be enough work to keep myself busy. But yeah, I probably had underestimated how much work there was and how quickly we would grow.
And how quickly did you grow?
Well, so within sort of the first year or 2, we had a solicitor on board, we had a conveyancer, some other admin staff. So we did grow pretty quickly. So we're sort of 9 years in now, starting from 2 of us, and we've now got 7 lawyers, 2 conveyancers, and nearly a total of nearly 19 staff. So
was that ever the plan?
No.
No. Why did you expand?
So I think initially the workload was just warranted it. So it was just, we better get someone in for the conveyancing. Oh, we should get, another lawyer. Oh, we need a few more, admin staff. So it kind of just was initially a bit of a Band-Aid fix, but I have grown more and more passionate to making living in the country sort of parallel with the city to some extent. So one thing that used to really annoy me was when people say, oh, you're a bush lawyer, oh, poor country, oh, the country. And so I've tried to create something in the country that gives country people and business people in the country a service that is sort of equivalent, so they don't need to go to Adelaide to get the good service.
So how did you do that? What did you do to make it comparable?
Yeah, so we do lots of training. So I've done lots of study and training. We've got really good networks with lots of barristers and other law firms in Adelaide. So I think the key is just keeping up with the trends, making sure you stay relevant. It'd be very easy, I think, in the country just to sort of sit back, because sometimes you don't have to do a lot of work to attract the clients. People are fiercely loyal in the country, so they do use country people. But my thinking is I want to give them something excellent, not something okay. And so staying relevant, I think, is really important.
You said you originally started to have that flexibility and you were starting a young family or wanting to start a young family. But it sounds to me that you just got busier and busier and busier. But did you still have that flexibility?
Well, it's kind of funny, actually, because when I started my firm, my husband and I sort of resigned ourselves to the fact that perhaps we wouldn't have children. And then 4 months after opening the doors, I took a pregnancy test and found out I was pregnant with twins. We thought, oh, okay, this is exciting, scary. But we sort of rolled with it. And then my daughter, so my first pregnancy, my daughter was born at 24 weeks. So I lost one of the twins and my daughter was born at 24 weeks. So I actually spent about 6 months in Adelaide and ran the firm remotely from my mobile phone and laptop whilst in the Women's and Children's Hospital. So, it's...
Oh, my goodness.
So that's not necessarily flexible. That was by necessity. But I think that experience helped us realise that you actually can be quite flexible in running a business.
But you also had to deal with the fact that you lost a twin as well, and getting your head around that, as well as... Was it actually a good thing because you had a distraction?
I think so. Yeah, I think that's definitely a good way to put it. So I'm the kind of person, as I said, that doesn't try and stress too much over things that you can't control. Just need to get on with it. But definitely, obviously, having Zoe in Adelaide in the neonatal intensive care unit, we had certain things we had to do there. It was very rigorous. But also knowing then that I had the distraction to keep the firm going, especially having had employees, I think that gave me a sort of another sense of responsibility that I couldn't let that fall apart because there was a responsibility to those people with those jobs. So.
Yeah, and their employment and their future.
Exactly.
So how was Zoe as a baby and balancing your business and a newborn?
Absolutely bliss. So we, once we got out of hospital, Zoe would come into the office with me, and Jen, my PA, she would sit in, if I had a client, Zoe would sit in there. She was just very flexible. So Zoe pretty much grew up in the office with us, and we're very lucky. Like, my husband is a farmer, so he spent a lot of time with her as well. Had grandparents who were amazing that live locally. So yeah, it just worked.
And then twins came along after that.
Yes. So we...
What does the go with you and twins?
Yeah. Well, the second round was an IVF round. So the first round was natural. And the second one, I remember going in for the test. So there's quite an age difference between them. But I remember going in and the doctor saying, oh, yes, and just letting you know that you're having twins. And my husband and I just looked at each other and sort of went, oh, dear, here we go again. But much different experience this time round. Got to 37 weeks, 2 very healthy boys. So, yeah, that was... we were only in the Women's and Children's Hospital for 1 day. We were...
Well,
yeah,
that
so
is
it was a
different.
much different experience this time round.
And what's the age difference between Zoe and the twins?
So Zoe's nearly 9 and the boys are 4. So,
and the boys' names are?
Max and Eddie.
Eddie. Golly. But 3 kids. All right. The business is expanding and you're doing extremely well. Kids are challenging at the best of times and it's not always smooth sailing. And how are the kids now?
They are very different. Boys and girls are very different. So as I said, Zoe sort of grew up in the office, and when the boys come in together, they are like little whirlwinds. So that's definitely a different dynamic. But yeah, so with the twins, so Max has cystic fibrosis.
When was he diagnosed with that?
At birth. Yeah, so he's actually led a pretty normal life with that, but he has he's had a couple of hospital admissions for a few weeks, so that just requires again another juggle and a little bit more flexibility to sort of manage his health. But he's on a bit of a wonder drug for CF patients at the moment called Kalydeco. So that manages a lot of his treatments and things like that, which is good.
So with cystic fibrosis these days, is it easily treatable and you can live a relatively normal life?
Yeah, I would say so. So Max obviously does regular physiotherapy that we sort of administer, and he has medication sort of twice daily, and he has when needed, a daily nebulizer that he has. But all in all, his day-to-day life, he still attends childcare, he runs around, he's just like, if you saw him, he's just a normal boy.
What's the long-term prognosis?
Yeah, so much better than it ever was. So I think years ago, you'd be very lucky if you had a child that sort of would get to their teens, whereas now we're told since he's started this drug, which basically helps his lung function, he'll probably outlive me. So they're saying, 60, 70, so...
Being a parent, you never want any struggles for your children. And you've said repeatedly in this interview already that you don't sweat the small stuff, which it's not a small thing, but you don't worry about things that you can't control. Is this something else that you just get on with it? It is what it is and you just get on with it.
Yeah, look, I think so. I mean, this diagnosis probably hit me the hardest out of all the things that have happened, because it really, I was worried. Probably like most people, when they hear the word cystic fibrosis, they sort of immediately jump to certain conclusions, which I did. And Bernie's family has history of cystic fibrosis. So he has a cousin who's now in her teens, who's a beautiful child, has lived a really good life. So for us, I think seeing that was kind of good. And we saw how her parents managed that diagnosis really well. So yeah, I guess for us, it's one of those things that it just forms part of your daily life. And we have great friends and family who all help us do it. So yeah, it's good.
And he goes into hospital, as you say, regularly, just for management reasons, just to manage the condition. Is that in Adelaide or can you do that locally?
Last year he was in hospital for a couple of weeks. He had a sort of a lung infection, which gets treated with antibiotics in hospital. And so because it was his first admission, we were there for a few weeks. He's going in again this week, but he'll only be in hospital for sort of 4 days. And then we do something called hospital at home. We have to be in Adelaide, but we'll try and make that fun for the kids, and we'll be there for a few weeks, and we sort of manage the treatments, and the cystic fibrosis nurse comes out daily and just checks the antibiotics and the pump and things like that.
And how does he manage it? Was it just, it's just always what he's known?
He's extraordinary. He's the placid of the two twins. So our twins are very different in their personalities, and Max is just a very laid back, happy little fella. So yeah, he just takes it in his stride.
Are they identical?
No, they're not identical. No, they're not identical really in any way. For those that know the boys, they often have a good laugh. So Max is our placid, very chilled one, and Eddie is our pocket rocket. So,
how has balancing not only the kids and your own business, but your husband's a farmer? How have you both managed that with two different career paths?
Yeah, so I've been pretty lucky. Farming's, my husband's also a qualified teacher, both of which are very complementary to having a wife that runs a business. So Bernie, when we first met, was sort of a full-time teacher, and then he sort of went back to part-time when Zoe was born. So he'd sort of juggle the farm and the teaching, and now he sort of does relief teaching. So he sort of around the farm and around our business and the kids, he just does relief teaching when things are quiet, and which is excellent.
So what type of teaching does he do?
Well, he's a PE teacher by trade, I suppose, but he with his relief teaching does sort of any age. Yeah,
that's great having that flexibility and diversity in your background.
Oh, it's so good. And I think it's great because farming, you can be out on the farm by yourself, and then teaching, you're at a school with hundreds of people. So I think he really probably enjoys that kind of the diversity in his own careers.
So with your job, are you away a lot, or is a lot of the work mainly in Jamestown?
So in the early days, I probably was away a lot more, in that if there was a court hearing or there was a mediation, you were down in Adelaide for that. And we still made it work. But since COVID, there's been a huge shift. And in fact, it's been really good for regional practices, because there's, I guess, a much bigger tolerance or acceptance for people, clients, the court, that Teams or Zoom, that electronic conferencing is used all the time. So, for example, in the middle of COVID, when there was a court hearing, rather than having to, brief a barrister and try and get them to appear if I couldn't appear, we just jump online and appear for court. And it's also, clients, I think, are very accepting. They don't really care where your lawyer is. Nowadays, they jump on a video call, they speak to us, and I've had several clients after the fact sort of say, oh God, I looked Jamestown up on the map, I didn't realise how far away you were, but it makes no difference.
You know how you mentioned that you were planning on going to Sydney and working for a big law firm, and then maybe going overseas, the big high life of a top-notch lawyer. Throughout your 20s and when you moved back here to help your mum, was there any point in time that you thought, I had that dream to go interstate or go beyond South Australia? Did you ever want to give that a crack anyway?
No, it's funny, isn't it? That was pretty much that sort of dissolved pretty quickly for me. I think I've really settled into the country life. I love I love the way people think and behave. It's very casual, but it's also, we still get really good, there's great matters and things. So I guess when I came back, I probably underestimated what a country law practice looked like and felt like compared to sort of what the reality is. So,
and you probably were exposed to a lot of things a lot quicker.
Oh, so good. It's like a doctor coming out to the country in terms of that exposure. And I think to be honest, that's one of the reasons why the young ones, when they come out, they enjoy it so much. Is for example, we were running some litigation recently, to the tune of over $100 million, so it's in the Supreme Court, there's some big stuff happening. And then the next day we might be doing something really rewarding, like going to the nursing home and, signing some documents for the elderly. So there is a really big cross-section of work. It's all rewarding in its own way, but there's definitely no time to be bored, that's for sure.
Do you do any criminal work?
It's probably the one area that I personally don't do a lot of. I did a lot in my early days, so I did a lot of court advocacy, so it was great for that. I did a couple of really big court matters early on, and to be honest, it probably just wasn't. It just didn't fit with my thinking necessarily. The firm definitely does do some criminal, but yeah, it's not one of our major focuses.
And corporate litigation, anything like that?
Yeah, so even though we live in the sticks, we are involved in some pretty heavy litigation in the courts. So we definitely get a taste of that. And I think the benefit for us is because we have got really good relationships with, KCs and barristers and things like that in Adelaide, we get to use the best of the best and learn from them without the pressure of having to do it all the time.
Did you have a vision when you were initially studying that you wanted to become a solicitor or a barrister? What's the hierarchy in law?
So basically, some people practice as solicitors all their life, and that's perfectly fine. Other people sort of, I think, hit a career point where they want to perhaps, so solicitors, for those that don't know, basically is you're the one in the site with the client, so you're taking all the client's instructions, and then you basically get the case together and then refer that on to a barrister who then runs your court case. So a barrister's in court all day, every day, effectively taking instructions from solicitors and running the case. I don't think you could start out as a barrister because you wouldn't have had the experience, but as you get more experienced and perhaps you want to limit the client contact or something like that, or you want to focus more on a technical area of law, that's when the expression is moved to the bar, so they become a barrister, sort of run those cases. So I guess if you weren't inclined, like a lot of solicitors are involved just in transactional work and so have no desire to become a barrister because being a barrister means being in court all day. it's just different, I suppose, more than anything. And then, of course, if some people have a desire to become a judge, it's not necessarily where I want to be. I think moving to the bar or moving to the bench, becoming a judge, I'd miss the client contact too much.
So just to be clear, are you a solicitor? Because you're not a barrister.
Yeah, so basically, in order for those people that sort of move to the bar and become a barrister, they would actually sit a bar exam, and then they're exclusively practicing as a barrister. A lot of solicitors, or a few solicitors, including myself, we often do a lot of court work. So we would, for example, be appearing in court, and the other side might have briefed a barrister. So in other words, we're working against a barrister, but we haven't sat the bar exam.
It's the best of both worlds, really.
I think so, yeah. And it's good for the clients, because if we take the instructions from them and then we can present their case in court, sometimes there's that continuity that they know that we know exactly what we need to present. Yeah.
You've got full control of the story.
Yeah, exactly.
With every guest on Voice It, I ask them what are the challenges and what are the highlights of their career. So what have been the challenges for you? We've talked about some personal challenges, but on a career level, what have you found the most difficult about starting a law firm in this particular area?
Look, I think, and it surprises me sometimes because I love the country so much, but it's sometimes difficult to attract practitioners, so to attract solicitors to basically come and move to Jamestown, embed themselves here and practice the law. So we've worked on the theory at KKL of attracting really good graduates, getting them here and showing them what the country has to offer, and there is a big attraction, I think, for graduates to come down and get their hands dirty on all areas of law. So I think once they do that and they come to the country, they realise that it's much better than perhaps what they'd perceived. But I'd say probably the biggest challenge is the perception, and maybe it's the perception I had at the beginning of my career, is that to be a good lawyer, you have to work in a big law firm and you know, the glitz and glamour, rather than heading to the country. So I think overcoming that perception is probably the biggest challenge as an employer of young solicitors.
And what about dealing with the members of the community? And in the city, they're sort of faceless people, aren't they? But in the community, you know these people, you socialise with them in a lot of cases. How do you balance that?
Yeah, look, it can be really challenging sometimes. I think the critical thing for me is confidentiality and making sure that we have the highest integrity here, so that people can come, and like you said, they come in when they're at their lowest, something catastrophic has happened in their life, unless they're buying a house or doing something nice like that. But generally speaking, if they're coming to a lawyer, they're not at their best. We're often given information that is highly sensitive and confidential, and things that it's much easier to tell a stranger those things than someone you know. But I think because we kind of hold those values tight, then when we go to netball practice that evening and run around on the netball court with them, not a word is uttered about it, and we just don't, it's just not even a thing. So I think that's been a really interesting perception, as, you know, growing up in the country, when I think people assume that I'm making some kind of judgment, or that I'm, you know, when I'm running around the netball court or I'm doing this, that I'm thinking about what they told me at work, when in actual fact I'm not at all. But yeah, that's probably one of the challenges, is that the people you act for are often your friends, your family, or your friends of your friends. So there is a lot of that we're just very mindful of.
When you're talking to the judge and talking on behalf of your client, when you're first starting out, is that really intimidating when you're up there in front of a judge and trying to state their case?
Absolutely petrifying. So a lot of young lawyers, when they start here, we throw them into a magistrate's court hearing or something straight away, because it is so petrifying. I can remember still back in my early days when I was at the Peterborough Courthouse, which is extremely small. I had about 10 different criminal law clients. I pretty much had no idea what I was doing, but I had the 10 files there. The judge would read out the name of the case. The prosecutor would say what they were charged with. I'd scurry around, look at the case, and put my submission forward. Oh, yes, it's a guilty plea, or whatever it was at the time. And I remember getting to the end of those 10 files and thinking, oh, thank God that's over. That was gruelling. I turned around and there was the Premier and the Attorney General sitting behind me in the back seat. They had come up to Peterborough for a cabinet meeting. And I walked past them, got outside the courtroom and went, well, that was random. And they both came up and said I did a really good job. So it's petrifying.
Have you ever made an error in that environment where the judge has said, no, that's not how we do things? Or has there been a bit of a ouch moment at all for you in your career?
Well, look, I think the thing I would say is when you're a junior lawyer and you're mostly in the magistrates' court doing guilty pleas and things, I actually think that the magistrates that come out on the country law circuits are so kind to young practitioners because they know the situation you're in. So, look, I'm sure there's been plenty of moments where I perhaps didn't in my early career articulate things as they should be, but the magistrates were very good at perhaps suggesting another way that I could ask for what I wanted. So, yeah, I'm sure there's been lots of boo-boos.
You've never done any cases that involve a jury?
I've been a part of them. So when I was doing a lot of criminal law, certainly it was a jury trial. And so the bit that I found fascinating was you're allowed to have an objection to jury members. And so in the particular case we were in, the barristers objected a couple of times because the jury members looked a little too nice or a little too, naive. So they were objected against. But in those sorts of jury trials, we always briefed really experienced barristers to come on board, but certainly we were a part of the case, and it's really exciting. But the jury trials are not quite as prevalent as what they once were.
Why not?
I think the way things are heading now, a lot less goes to litigation, and a lot of matters are settled, including those criminal matters. So there's just less of them. There's just less court work.
On that, how much has the legal profession changed since you started to what it is today? Has it transformed in a different direction?
Yeah, that's an awesome question, and one that I think absolutely it has. When I first started, no matter which area of law I was practicing, whether it was criminal law, commercial law, family law, we were always heading to court for what they call a trial. So basically you'd run your case through and then ultimately the judge or magistrate would make a final decision. And it was very rare that you would settle a matter. You'd run it through and just see what the judge had to say. Whereas now I'd say very, very few of our matters run to trial because there's such a really heavy focus on sort of mediation and alternate dispute resolution, because running those trials is just so horrendously expensive. But also the courts have such a heavy load at the moment trying to hear all of those cases that if you want something to run to trial, you're years away from getting an outcome. So
why is there such a heavy load? What's brought on that backlog?
I guess the issue has always been there, but it's, perhaps lack of judges, lack of funding in the court systems. There's probably lots of reasons for it. But I think the alternate dispute resolution has just been such a positive thing, and it's been a really good thing for lawyers because it means that even the court rules mean you must do certain things by way of trying to resolve a dispute in the early days, whereas historically you just didn't have to. Someone had come to you in a property settlement, they'd separated, you'd file an application in the family court and away you go. And so that has probably created a huge backlog of cases. Whereas now, before you can even make an application in the family court, you have to have done a heap of disclosure, you have to have put forward an offer, you have to have attended a mediation. So, you're substantially a long way away from being able to file proceedings in any jurisdiction really without having attempted the mediation. I think it's been a very conscious decision by the lawmakers to encourage people to try and resolve their own disputes. So, and it is inherent in all the court rules that you must do these things. So, it's legislated that you must participate in these things. To be honest, I think generally speaking, it's been a really good thing.
Are there any mentors or people that steered you in a certain direction or that gave you a lot of guidance to make you who you are today?
Look, everyone's parents shape them in some way or the other. So my mum and dad were huge influences on me growing up and sort of making me the person I am. But in terms of the businesswoman that I am, I've had an auntie and a couple of uncles who just saw things in me that I didn't see in me, and probably pushed me to do things that, like starting my own business and employing that one extra person and things like that. So just perhaps giving me the confidence to do things that I maybe otherwise wouldn't have.
If your dad was here today, what do you think he would think about what you've achieved?
I think he'd be pretty happy. He was a very modest fellow, but was always very proud of us girls when we were playing sport and doing other things. So people used to joke about him and sort of say that whenever they'd talk to him, all he'd do was talk about us children. So I'm guessing he'd be pretty happy.
And what about Mum? Is she still in the region?
Yeah, yep. So Mum lives pretty close by. She helps look after the kids, and we're all very close with Mum. And probably, without Mum's help and my mother-in-law's help, we wouldn't be able to live the life we do. So we're very lucky.
Where do you see Kelly in about 10 years' time?
So I'd like to think that we're still thriving and still growing, and I'd love to think that some of the young lawyers that we've got with us today are still here and perhaps thinking about taking over, so I can step back. I have really no desire to do anything else other than to keep running the practice here for a long time.
So no developing of Kelly legal franchises around the countryside?
No, keep it simple. I think the reason I love doing what I'm doing is I love the country people. I think what we do well is we have really good relationships with country people, and we're really relatable to them. We do have a lot of Adelaide clients and a lot of interstate clients, which is just lovely. But yeah, I'm just happy with where we're at.
For those young people that are studying law or are looking to study law or even go out on their own and start their own business or own practice, what would your advice be?
Look, my advice would be, and something that I'm pretty passionate about, is give the country a go in your early years. Come out, roll up your sleeves, try something new. So step outside of your comfort zone, come and try the different areas of law. I can guarantee you'll love it. And if you don't absolutely love it, I guarantee you'll learn something that will set you up. With partners at some of the really big firms, and they always say to me, there's nothing better than a lawyer that's done a few years in the country. We can tell they've had the experience. It just accelerates your career, I think.
Kelly, thank you so much for taking the time to speak to me. I really appreciate it.
No worries. It's been wonderful. Thank you.
Kelly Morgan from Kelly Legal in Jamestown. Congratulations on everything you've achieved, Kelly, and good luck with the practice. Going back to Kelly's motto, worrying is like a rocking chair. It gives you something to do but gets you nowhere. I've stuck that on my fridge to remind me to not sweat the small stuff and not to worry about things you can't control. And I think a lot of us can relate to that. I hope you enjoyed Kelly's story. If you want to find out more about Kelly Legal, all her details are in my show notes. And if you're a wannabe lawyer and need advice or even a start in the industry, Kelly would be a fabulous mentor. If you're new to the Voice It podcast, my name is Annabelle Homer and I run Voice It. It's a communications business specialising in public speaking training, audio memoir production, podcasting for other businesses and emceeing. If any of those services interest you, get in contact. That's it for another episode. I'll catch you next time on the Voice It podcast.